The books are not enough for you? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Today, we're going to have a look at the Unearthed Arcana content on D&D Beyond. Welcome to the Attic Dungeon. Whether you want to be a psychic ninja or you dream of becoming Iron Man, I'm here to help you with everything. So by now, the D&D books of 5e cover a lot of different playable classes and subclasses. Most of the best known fantasy archetypes have become playable from the start of 5e or over the years by adding new subclasses, and they've also added a lot of lesser known archetypes or completely new ideas to the game, and they continue to do so with the Unearthed Arcana, which you can kind of see as D&D's playtest field. Regularly on D&D Beyond and other sites, you can find the Unearthed Arcana files which add, for example, a new subclass to a certain class for playtesting. Quite a few of these make it into a core book afterwards. For example, a while ago the Theros book came out and you have the College of Eloquence in there for bards. I think year before that, the College of Eloquence was available for playtesting through D&D Beyond. Other Unearthed Arcanas, or UAs as I'll call them from now on, just disappear afterwards, like the Giant Soul Sorcerer. I thought he was really fun, but he didn't make it into one of the books, and the UA vanished from the side as well. You can always find older UAs back in the UA archive though, so it's not like Wizard destroys them completely, they just remove them from the spotlight. Today, we're going to have a look at some UAs that I believe should really make it into a core book, either because they have a strong fantasy behind them, they fill in some missing fantasy archetype, or they manage to use the class in an entirely new way, tapping into new resources and new play style, which I can always promote heavily. If you like what I'm doing, dear people, do not hesitate to leave a like, leave a comment, or even press the almighty subscribe button. And now, without any further ado, let's have a look at our very first UA, which is an Artificer one, the Armorer. The Armorer is a new subclass for the newest of D&D classes, namely the Artificer. Remember how the Battlesmith gave the Artificer a greater weapon proficiency and a nice little pet on the side? This one expands your armor proficiencies instead. You gain the heavy armor proficiency and you gain access to a set of power armor. There's some good stuff about this armor. It doesn't have a strength requirement, it counts as your casting focus, and it can be removed against your will, and it also replaces missing limbs. So the only relevant question for this subclass is, how would you like to become Iron Man? Using the armor as your casting focus allows you to shoot your spells from your hands like a proper superhero. There's two armor models, Guardian and Infiltrator, and as with a lot of Artificer abilities like the infusions, you can swap things out at the end of a long rest. The Guardian armor gives you Thunder Fists as a D8 melee weapon, and you gain a bonus action that allows you to gain a shield equal, temporary HP that is, equal to your Artificer level. Which is not that much. I mean, you gain the feature at level 3, so that's 3 temp HP, but you can do this every turn without limit. So whenever you have your bonus action not being used, you can always gain temporary hit points, and that is actually a pretty decent way to tank up the already considerable tanky subclass. The Infiltrator armor then gives you a gem-like node on your chest or one of your fists, which deals 1d6 lightning damage at range, and once per turn you can add another d6 per creature. Later on you get extra attack, for example, then you can shoot 2 creatures and you can add the extra d6 to both of those creatures, but you cannot add it multiple times to one creature. The armor also becomes skin tight when you're taking the Infiltrator mode, so it will not impose disadvantage on stealth checks. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, you're wearing plate armor and sneaking about at the same time. And this is just the level 3 stuff. to be honest. Further down the road, as I said, you gain extra attack, more armor features, and amongst the spells that you get is also Wall of Force, which is actually an incredibly useful spell. I absolutely love this subclass. I like giant robots, and this is the closest thing D&D is going to let me come as a player. You can design a really iconic armor for yourself if you want to, and you can be a frontline powerhouse or shoot lightning, punch things with Thunder Fist. The Thunder Fist can be dual wielded, by the way. If you want to use your bonus action for offense instead of the defensive shield, you can just dual wield Thunder Fists and punch things to death. As I said, the shield is not super powerful, but the fact that you can repeat it every turn actually makes it pretty good. It also, as I said, the entire subclass keeps in line with the flexibility that I really appreciate in the Artificer class. You can prepare spells every day, you can deactivate and reactivate some infusions every day. You can pick what suit of armor you're wearing every day. I mean, for me, this is really something that the class is all about, being very flexible. And this subclass does that while looking super awesome at the same time. Nice little bonus, both of the weapons, so both the Thunder Fist and the Lightning Ray, can use your intelligence as their attack stat instead of strength or dexterity. Other weapons will still rely on strength or dexterity though, so the Battlesmith is clearly more flexible when it comes to weapon usage if you manage your infusions right, and of course also has the pet to differentiate from this walking tank. A bit more design might be needed. The UA does not state how you select what armor becomes your power armor or what the process is. There's like one or two minor mechanics missing there, and so far the power armor, and this is actually pretty important, is not a magical item, which means you can further enhance it with your Artificer infusions, which might actually be the point here, tinkering with your gear even more. This could lead to some crazy early armor class on the Artificer though. If you pick up the defensive buff, a plate armor suit, and a shield, you can be as tanky as a fighter, and you can go beyond that once you learn how to make the shield buff as well. Then you can add even more armor class. This thing could literally be a walking tank. The UA for Artificers also brought an infusion that allows you to pass a failed concentration save by using your reaction. Now this might be a bit over the top, to be honest. Then again, we have precious little spell slots as it is, so you might want to make them last. Still though, the power armored haste enchanted Artificer is going to have a lot of fun, knowing that it's going to be really hard to slow him down in between this new infusion and the, Flash of Insight thing that you can use to buff a saving throw. It's going to be really hard to deactivate haste of your Artificer, so go out there and punch things with all your fists. Next up, we're having a look at the Wild Soul Barbarian, a slightly more magical version of our beloved axe-wielding Angry Boy. It's not a spellcasting subclass like Eldritch Knight or Arcane Trickster, because casting spells while raging is not really a thing. Nevertheless, this subclass offers the Barbarian some unique interactions with spells and spellcasters, which is why I chose this subclass. It diversifies the Barbarian a bit, because too many of his subclasses are focusing on things the Barb is already good at, namely tanking and or spanking. This subclass assumes your Barbarian has had some lasting interaction with the Feywild and makes him a heavy promoter of the ideals of freedom above all, which is a nice thing to work around from a role-playing aspect. At level 3, you gain the ability to cast Detect Magic a number of times equal to your Constitution modifier. This should be quite okay, because you're a Barbarian. You only need 2 attribute scores, namely Strength and Constitution, so they have to be as high as possible. So that's a nice bit of utility already, but it becomes even better when you start raging. You explode with Fey energy of freedom, and you add a random magical effect from a D8 table. It's called a Wild Surge table, but don't worry, the effects are nowhere near as detrimental of some of the ones in the Wild Sorcerer table. They're all positive, and they range from gaining extra armor class to being able to teleport while raging, magical boomerang weapons, or creating difficult terrain all around you. Level 6 allows you to do some cool stuff. You can touch a creature gently. You're a barbarian. Touch him gently. You roll a d4 and the creature restores a spell slot of the level equal to the roll. If it's not a caster, the creature gains 5 times the die as temporary HP. Later on, this will become a d6. The big oof here is, of course, that your barbarian is going to suffer force damage equal to 5 times the number as well. Why force damage? So you can't rage and do this and then halve the damage that you take. Ha, that's why. I love this interaction, I really do. The Barb is able to infuse spellcasters with renewed energies or shield martial allies, but 4 times the damage as drawback is maybe a bit too big. I get why they do it though, because there's no set number of times rather that you can use this. As long as you have HP, you can keep fueling your wizards. 20 damage for a level 6 barbarian. If you want to restore a level 4 spell slot, it's quite manageable but still hefty. Then again, it gives you a reason to use those big number hit dice, and maybe you can actually take a feat to further improve those and actually be sure that you're a walking battery pack for all your spellcasting friends. Or if that doesn't happen, I don't know, maybe Wizard scales this down to 2 or 3 times the damage. But I think the Barbarian has the HP to make it work, but it sounds a bit excruciatingly punishing at this point. Then again, I haven't seen this Barbarian in play yet, so it might just be me. I could imagine higher level Barbarians would be more than happy to take 30 damage to the face to reimburse a level 6 spell slot. Later on, you get even more magical related fun stuff. You gain the ability to dish out 3d6 of force damage whenever someone forces you to make a saving throw, which is a great anti-magic tool, to be honest, because there is no range requirement either. It can be straight up in front of your face, or the sneaky caster bastard can be 200 feet away of you. If he's making you roll a saving throw, you can magically force punch him in the face. The last ability that you gain allows you to use your bonus action to reroll your active magic effect while raging. Again, I love this subclass because it makes your barbarian a bit more magical, even more than the storm barbarian already does, and I really like the fact that it gives your barbarian interaction with your party's casters and even actually with the martial characters. Using HP as a resource is really good for a barbarian. You have a metric shit ton of it, so you might as well use it in more ways than just getting punched in the face. It's super nice and it's very manageable for a barbarian. It's not a new resource that you have to track, so it's also new player friendly. It's just the same old hit points pool that you used to get punched in the face, you now also use to fuel the wizards. Super good, and at the same time you're still an angry barbarian with a lot of cool effects. Next up, we're talking rogues. Why rogues? Because they're one of 2 classes that are tapping into a new source of power. Right now in 5e we've got martial classes, arcane classes, divine classes, even some primal classes, but we haven't gotten any psionic classes yet. And I don't think we'll be getting them for now, but we are very possibly going to get some psionic subclasses, and that is exactly what the Soul Knife Rogue is, a psychic stabby stab character. Great stuff. Hopefully we get it in whatever is going to be the follow-up for a big content book like Xanatar's Guide to Everything. When you gain the subclass at level 3, you gain some very basic psychic stuff. You gain a psionic talent die, which starts as a d6 and can be used to buff ability skill or tool checks that you failed, or to determine how many people you can have telepathic thoughts with for an hour. The cool thing is, these abilities are not limited in any of the conventional ways. Instead of it saying you can use this X times and its X is equal to your main attribute modifier, you can use it until you burn out your brain. How does that happen? Well, so you start with the d6 and let's say you fail a very crucial stealth roll. You can roll and add the d6. As long as you roll a 2 to 5, nothing too spectacular happens. You add the number and hopefully pass your failed check. If you roll a 6, wow, you get super buffs to your roll, but your die shrinks, so your d6 is now a d4 for your next time that you're going to use this die. If you then roll a 4 on your d4, you've burned through all of your psionic energy. You've forced it so hard that you kind of blew your brains out and you're no longer able to psychic for the rest of the day. Don't worry, you don't turn into a drooling idiot, you just can't psychic anymore, alright? On the other side, if on these wonderful rolls you roll a 1 on your d6, you probably still won't pass the skill check, but your die gets promoted to a d8. If you would still fail, it gets promoted to a d10. You see where this is going? They want to represent the ebb and flow of the psionic energy in your body. I just think it's a really, really cool mechanic. Once per day, also, you can reset the die back to whatever level your starting die is. You can use it, of course, to prevent your brain from becoming Psy-Goop way too soon. So that's, of course, already a really cool feature and a nice new resource to manage, but where are my literal soul knives? A bit lower in the UA it seems, and they're called Psychic Blades for some reason. Whenever you attack, be it ranged or melee, you can create a Psychic Blade, which is a d6 finesse and thrown weapon which disappears right after the attack, whether it hits or misses. It is magical in nature and it leaves no marks on the victim's body, which RP wise is super cool. You're able to assassinate a guy without leaving any marks. D&D cops are going to hate you for that one. You can dual wield these bad boys, of course, with the usual bonus action, but the second blade is always going to be a D4. What the blades don't do, however, they don't level up. So if at some point you find a magical +2 dagger, it might actually be able to use, be better to use that one, especially as your offhand weapon instead of the D6 Psychic Blade. These two abilities together, however, do create a very strong, flavored subclass that, in my own opinion, has some cool abilities, and they're not limited in the conventional way, which is really, really cool. Also, you always have weapons everywhere. How cool is that? Later on, this subclass gives you the ability to add your psionic talent die to your attack rolls made with your psychic blades. But if because of this you hit, your die will automatically shrink one size. So you're spending brain power, but you're coming closer to brain psychic goop. So keep that in mind. Also, you can throw a blade and teleport to where it lands, again at the cost of a die reduction. Of course, I think I already mentioned this, but the die grows with you. It starts as a d6, but I think somewhere at level 5 or 6 it becomes a d8 and then a d10. So you have more stuff to do before your brains get goopified. Even later, you get access to invisibility and stun, so you become a super lethal psychic assassin. Apart from the flavor, I also like this new dice resource on this subclass. Some people might dislike it a bit because it is a bit luck based, but I'm glad we're using something else than you have this and you can use it an X amount of times, and X is going to be either 2, as with Channel Divinity, or a number equal to your primary ability modifier. Why? Because it forces you to, in the case of the primary ability modifiers, it forces you to almost always buff this ability score when you reach an ASI level. I think the Artificer actually is a good example. The Artificer has so many of his abilities tied to his intelligence modifier that it becomes really hard to justify taking a feat at certain levels because all of your abilities need your intelligence modifier. Whereas if you have a different style of resource management for your non-spell slot-like abilities, it also offers you a bit more flexibility in how you're going to build your characters. So both this and the Wild Soul Barbarian allow you to push your luck to gain extra power or fail hard while doing it, but it is going to create fun and grand moments at the table, and that is what it's all about. Stuff like this that both expands class options, game mechanics, and gives you new RP options are exactly what Wizards should put in whatever might eventually become a second Senator's Guide to Everything like book. Our last entry of today will continue the trend of taking a class and opening up a new aspect that hasn't been explored before. It is the Order of Scribes Wizard. Like the Blade Singer, This one doesn't focus on a single school of magic, but creates new aspects for the wizard to focus on. In this case, his spellbook. It will give you an awakened spellbook together with a magical quill that doesn't need any ink and will reduce your time and cost for inscribing new spells for all schools. The book can be your spell focus, but it also allows you to do cool stuff like changing a spell's damage type to any other damage type that is also in your spellbook. Fireball, more like lightning ball, am I right? This, of course, is just really great for avoiding immunities and resistances. Fireball! Everybody loves Fireball, but if you're playing Curse of Avernus, which heads deep down into hell, you know you're going to encounter some fire-resistant bad guys. So being able to go from Fireball to Acid Ball is a really good way of avoiding that problem. Once per long rest, you can also cast a ritual spell at normal speed, which is not going to break the game whatsoever, but it has some really cool stuff that you can pull up when you're only having a limited amount of time to do your wizard shenanigans. At higher levels, you will also be able to make a special spell scroll that only works for you. It will only allow you to pick a level 1 or a level 2 spell though, but it will count as one level higher. It's limited, but the good news is the scrolls are created pretty much instantly. So there's the upside of that, and you're basically creating extra spell slots for yourself in this way. Also, you're very proficient at creating regular spell slots that other people are actually able to use, which can cause some very fun party interactions. Later on, you can summon your book's mind in some shape or form, and it kind of acts like a beefed familiar. At some point you will learn how to swap places with your tiny book familiar. You can also cast spells from there as you can with your familiar, and you can resurrect yourself through your spellbook, but you permanently lose a certain amount of spells that can only be restored through a wish spell, one at a time. So that is a very hefty cost, but then again, that is like the ultimate ability, one of the ultimate abilities, together with the teleportation, tied to this subclass, so you shouldn't be dying every other day at that point. Now, this one doesn't seem like the most powerful wizard subclass out there, but I really like it for the concept. Having a sentient spellbook is super cool, and to be honest, the ability to change damage types of your spell can be really strong and gives you flexibility. The spell scrolls allow you to cast more spells per day than any given wizard would be able to, and they give you something good to do during downtime. Creating those regular spell scrolls is a downtime activity, so it gives you a way to fill that one up. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I showed you 4 UAs. There's around 20 or something at this point. So if you want to have a look at the rest, go to D&D Beyond, have a look and tell me which one is your absolute favorite. Now, if you're too lazy to do that, I have some good news. At some point later in the future, I'll cover some more of these UAs. I think it's really nice to see where the game is heading and what kind of mechanics Wizards is thinking of using in the game. Also, I'm already making builds in my head with these new subclasses. So if you want to see them, you'll have to return at some point to the Attic Dungeon.